Hello, this is Mark Lowry with TheaterJones.com, and today we're going to be talking to Afton Battle, who is the new General Director for the Fort Worth Opera. Hello, Afton.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
Good. So let's start off with some basics about you. I know you're a Texas native. You were born in Amarillo. Were you involved in the Amarillo Opera at all, or?
I was actually born in Lubbock,
Okay.
and raised in El Paso,
Okay.
and moved to Amarillo the summer before my freshman year of high school. And it is native to me because that's where I started my involvement with opera. And so, yes, to answer your question, I was involved with Amarillo Opera for many, many years. I studied with Mila Gibson, who is the founder of Amarillo Opera. And I studied with Mary Jane Johnson, who is now the current general director of Amarillo Opera. So Amarillo Opera is deep in my heart and 100% hands down where I got my start.
Yeah. Before that, tell me how you discovered or found opera and fell in love with singing.
I discovered and found opera just at that time. So living in Amarillo, I had always sung in choir, in church choir and in school choir. But when we moved to Amarillo and I finished high school, I went to Amarillo College. And I was in a pageant, the Miss Juneteenth pageant, and Mila Gibson was one of the adjudicators. And I sang as my talent portion, and she was the judge. And she came back after the competition and asked me if I wanted to take voice lessons with her. And I had no idea what voice lessons were. I had no idea what classical music was, opera. I knew that it was church ladies who sang really high. And then some individuals, you know, from things that we learned in watching after school programs like Sesame Street. And so I started studying with Mila, and she was the individual who introduced me to opera and introduced me to what it meant to sing and all of the facets of singing and studying and practicing, things that I had no idea about. And I fell in love with opera when we were at a Nats competition. And it was in North Texas, it was in Denton. And we went to an opera, and it was my first live opera, and it happened to be La Traviata. And it was either at Fort Worth Opera or Dallas Opera, because they're the only two companies in North Texas. And we were watching Traviata, and it was at the end of the opera, and she's having, you know, hallucinations about she's feeling better, and you know, she lets out the big "Oh Joya," and then she falls flat on the ground, dead. I was mortified, but also completely just exhilarated by the drama, by the music, because at that, you know, that part in the opera, the orchestra is wailing away, just sighing, and it's just glorious. And there was this visceral feeling of enchantment. And we got back to Amarillo, and about a week later, I went to the registrar's office. And I said, I have to change my major from business to voice, performing arts. And that was it. And I never looked back.
That's amazing. What is your fach, and do you have a preferred era or style of opera to sing?
Oh, okay, yes. So I'm a soprano, a bigger voiced soprano, dramatic soprano. My favorite composer to sing is Strauss, by far. The lines that he writes are for soprano, and for his bigger voice sopranos are just glorious. The four last songs, one of my favorite pieces, the long, luxurious lines that soar over the orchestra. So I really, really love Strauss.
Tell me about your transition from being a performer into going into the administrative and development and consulting area.
Yes. So I finished my master's at Westminster Choir College, really right at the time of the economic recession. So this was in 2010, and we were in the thicket of it, and companies were experiencing almost exactly what we're experiencing now, with um, the economy just tanking and no ticket sales and the arts really suffering. And so when I came out of school, I was still very optimistic and still trying to chase after a career and take lessons and coachings, but that comes at a price. And so I was not being heard for roles in which I thought that I could potentially start to cover at regional houses such as Fort Worth Opera or any other, house our size. Um, and it became very tough. And the name of the game was survival, living in New York City. And so one job turned into two, turned into three, turned into how do you maintain living here while also trying to maintain singing at the same time. And so it became very clear that while the passion for opera and singing has never left me, that it was not a road in which I thought at the time was going to be fruitful. And so I made the decision to really make the pivot from pursuing a career in vocal performance and stage career to trying to find my home in arts and opera, on the other side of it. So I tried at every turn I applied for internships, and I applied for, small paid positions, lower level positions, and just didn't have a lot of success. And I knew that development, what I knew of development at that time in my life, I knew that I would be relatively good at it. As a young artist singing with some major companies, we all are development officers and we don't even know it. We're advocates for the company. We are promoting a season that we're a part of, et cetera, at donor events, galas, concerts. And we are walking advertisements. And so I knew that I really enjoyed that and I could talk to anyone, and I knew opera. And so as I started to research more, I thought, oh, okay, so this thing called development is this. Okay, that feels natural to me. And so I just continued to try to find my way into that industry within opera, and really had a very tough time. And it wasn't until after I moved to Chicago that I was able to break into the world of nonprofit arts administration. And that was, about 5 or 6 years ago. So it took that long for me to really find my pathway into arts administration. And then it took an additional 5, 6 years to find my way back into opera.
Gotcha. Yeah, I see from your resume that you worked with the Joffrey Ballet, the National Museum of Mexican Art in Chicago, and in New York, you've also worked with New York Theater Workshop. So you really have a range of working within the performing and the visual arts. Did you also have you loved opera and you learned more about it, but did you also have a love for the other arts as well?
Oh, yes. I love the performing arts. And once I really took my mind and dived into the world of learning everything about opera when I was in school and studying in Amarillo, and then, Houston and Westminster afterwards, everything else really started to fall into place. So, you are learning and studying opera, you inevitably become familiar with orchestra and symphony and symphonic works because there's I mean, we don't have to talk about either. There's tons of crossover, but also just the beauty of it. And composers that you love to sing are also composers, for me personally, that I love to listen to their orchestral work. So fell in love with orchestra pieces and symphonic pieces, and always had an interest in visual arts, especially classical visual arts, and learning more about old masters. And you find all of the similarities of what someone like Rubens or Caravaggio was painting at the time, what's happening in the world of music, and what's being, what is being performed, and who are the composers that are in that time frame. And so there's just all of this crossover, and it is really, it's like a blended family, and so it always has, I shouldn't say always, but as I got older, all of the arts, performing visual arts, became so important to me as an individual, and what has really shaped and formed me in terms of what I love, how I like to spend my free time, when I travel, what I look forward to in traveling. So, and it is an art form, or let me say, the appreciation of the art form as a whole really has shaped who I am also as an arts administrator.
Right, because opera, sort of like theater, and maybe more so, really can blend all of those arts together. You often have dance, and you have full, design-wise, you have set design and all that stuff. It really is sort of of an amalgamation of all of that, and even visual art in a sense, in terms of painting or the use of actual classical art in opera productions you might see.
Yeah, absolutely. And, creating an image with bodies on stage, whether they are bodies who are singing or bodies who are moving, or bodies that are still, is that visual art aspect. That's why the ecosystem, if you will, of creatives who work in theater, who work in opera, who work in theater, who work in the ballet, it's all theater. That's why those creatives are so important as well, right? A scenic designer who creates a visual scene by the designs that they make, a costumer who creates a visual scene by the way that they dress a cast. It's so interchangeable, and it really, for me, opera is the best of both worlds of music and theater. And that's why I'm always so excited when there's a new production of a beloved old piece, someone's new production of a Butterfly or a Bohème. I would love to see a new production of Rosenkavalier. The only Rosenkavalier I've ever seen live is the Met. And that's an old Zeffirelli, I believe, production, and it's period, and it's gorgeous, obviously. But imagine what a new version of Rosenkavalier would and could look like, with all of the minds and creativity of the creatives who go into producing theater. So opera is the best of theater. It's the best of everything theater is, from storytelling to a visual component. And then you add the amazing kind of spellbinding, in some cases, music to it. You add the voice, you add the orchestra, you add the choir, and if there's a children's chorus, then, forget about it. Everyone's, weeping and in tears and applauding and all of those things. So it is an amalgamation. It's a stirring pot of just all of the creatives in one.
Sure. Now you mentioned, when you started off in this world, we were in the recession, and there are a lot of similarities to what is happening now. And there certainly are, but right now we're facing an even bigger challenge in that you're not able to perform. And opera is one of those art forms that seems, in terms of COVID, particularly challenging, because you've got voice, you've got singing, You've got choral, people in the chorus. As we know, musical theater and opera and choral music and choirs are really kind of facing the biggest challenges in terms of returning to performance. And I know we cannot, at this point, no one can predict what's happening because we're still not out of this. But what do you see happening in the near future and for 2021 with the Fort Worth Opera?
Yes, absolutely. COVID has really been a blessing in disguise. It has made us sit up and become incredibly agile because it is unpredictable. This pandemic and this virus is unpredictable, and none of us know when we will be able to gather in spaces in large quantities of people. So it's forced us to think outside of the box. It's forced us to become innovative. It's forced us to reach deep into our own creative minds and say, how can we still engage with our community, our patrons, singers? How can we still engage with artists and create something that will not only serve the community, but also help to serve the companies? And so Fort Worth has been incredibly innovative in that round and has created the Green Room, which is the online space where we've just completed a long audition intensive workshop and series of masterclasses with Jennifer Rowley, which has been phenomenal. We have a new series coming up, part of our Frontier series. It's a libretto workshop. And Fort Worth has created a space for creation in this time. And as we look forward into 2021, one of the things that we are lucky about in living in North Texas is we have the climate most of the time to be able to do performances or to be outside. Unlike some of our organizations and companies in the Northeast who, will have to batten down the hatches come December or, January, depending on, we're able to, if the weather is pleasant, we're able to still have outdoor gatherings. And we are aiming to take full advantage of that. We are aiming to take full advantage of the opportunity to present creative works and present music and engage with families and communities by going out into the community, by taking opera, by taking our resident artists, by taking our music and our local artists into the communities and offering some outdoor performances. So without giving too much away, that is what Fort Worth Opera is looking into 2021 doing on some really fun, cool, sporadic, if you will, occasions, as well as some more thought out and planned events that will be outdoors and hopefully enjoyable for all.
Yeah, I know you haven't announced anything yet, but the recent announcement by the Metropolitan Opera that they're canceling their entire season, and I know they do a lot of operas in the season. But since that announcement, what kind of conversations are you and your colleagues at other opera companies having about indoor performance and for you guys a festival in 2021?
Yes, well, in the industry, we all are continuing to grow the way that we engage virtually, and understanding that it has created a world for us that has removed barriers to the accessibility of this art form, which is fantastic. And because of that, on the tail really of what I said earlier in terms of COVID being a blessing, is that we can't go back from there. We cannot go back from having this opportunity to reach audiences, new individuals in this virtual platform. We can't go back from there, and we won't. It's a great opportunity to do that. It is a great opportunity to enter into the homes and the lives of people who we wouldn't normally see maybe downtown in Bass Hall. So, we're not going back from there. And so the conversations in the industry really have been, how do you expand upon that? How do you grow that from home recitals to maybe a studio type of offering, to maybe a live streamed offering, in a church, or, a setting that has the ability to have live musicians, singers, pianists, a small orchestra, or, a string quartet or something like that. And so that's, the conversations are happening. And at Fort Worth, as you know, the company has had a festival season for, 16 years or so. And so while that model had worked for the company, we are really looking forward to moving away from a festival season to a more traditional stagione, if you will. So we have more offerings for the community year round. It's really tough to cram everything into a short, 1 month or 2 month period of time and expect to have an audience that is able to take advantage of that and grow that audience and engage with that audience. It's really tough. And especially in a place like Fort Worth, because while there's a lot to see and do, it's not a Chautauqua or a Marilla, if you will, where folks might go there just for to partake in that particular opera's season. And so moving away from the festival allows us to engage with our audience and our community year long in a traditional calendar setting, and allows for us to produce more works. And so as we look forward beyond 21, the actual calendar year of 21, and as I look to 21-22 season, being able to come back and emerge, if you will, hopefully after the COVID pandemic, in this new format of offering, 2 or 3 productions a year, and engaging with our community around those 2 and 3 productions, and having so much more to offer our residents of Fort Worth and Tarrant County is really what we're really excited about.
Yeah, and I think, a lot of people, when they think about not having indoor performances, they often think it's really for the audience's safety, and that's a big part of it. But it's also about the artist, because with opera, like with theater, you're not just talking about what's happening on stage. There's a lot of stuff happening backstage, and there are costume changes and props and a lot of things that are shared by people. There's a lot of touching that would have to go on. So these are all things that are still sort of dangerous and unknown.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's important for all of us in theater. Doesn't matter the particular branch of theater, if you will, that you're in. It's important for all of us to have a comprehensive policy around protection, around safety. And that's something that we haven't had to take into account, before, is how we are sanitizing dressing rooms, how we are sanitizing props, how we are, keeping our singers safe during rehearsal period, during performance, how often we will perform tests on our singers, when they can be in close proximity again. And then you have the instrumentalist, the orchestra, as well as, anyone else who supers on stage, and the chorus. So it is a big production, if you will, and a big thing, a big idea to have to be able to manage the operation of keeping everyone as safe as possible. And, just kind of one thing I'll say on that is, we all are having the conversations of how to come back, when to come back, how to do it safely. Some of our, companies, sister companies, are a little further ahead than others, which is great, and we use each other as resources in that way. But something that's amazing about what we have to learn in this time of having limited gatherings and being spaced physically in a responsible manner is, while the grandeur of opera is captivating, it is what draws people in, it drew me in, it is not always necessary to tell this. It is that grandeur is not always necessary to tell the story. You can tell the same story, the same love, tragic story of Butterfly, the same love, tragic story of Tosca. You can tell that same story in a pared down, digestible fashion, without the grandeur of a huge portrait of Flora that, you know, Mario is painting at the beginning, or big ballroom scenes with 100-person chorus. You can tell the same story. And that is the beauty of this, is we should be getting back to the core of what opera is storytelling. It is storytelling of words, a story on a page set to music. And we can do that without a $1 million production.
Yeah, I want to get, we'll come back to some specific Fort Worth Opera stuff, but it's a good segue into talking about opera and the way we've often seen it presented, and the conversations we're finally having, should have happened a long time ago, about equity and inclusion. And it goes from things like, you know, there certainly have been there have been a number of POC or BIPOC performers in opera throughout its history. But when we look at administration and staff and board members, it's definitely been lacking. And then also look at the performance of opera in terms of diversity and representation. So I know, you know, finally the Met years ago decided to stop doing blackface when they're doing Othello, for instance. And Butterfly is a good example where we probably see, you know, yellowface in productions. What are your thoughts about how your company should move forward with that, and the opera world in general?
Yeah, opera has been stained, this industry has been stained with the idea of elitism. And with that comes the problems of injustices and equity issues, and, to be perfectly honest, just what's right and wrong. And so within the industry, you know, we are at this point in time in life, in this civil movement that's happening right now, where we are sitting up and taking note. And I say taking note and not notice, because it's not that it hasn't been on notice. It is just that we are in this point in time where we can't go anywhere, so we're taking note. There's nothing else to do but to really take note. And so in the industry, you've made mention of it, a lot of conversations have happened, and that's all fine and good. But in order to turn those conversations into change, you have to take action. You can say all the things that you want to say about being equitable and inclusive and having diversity, but what are the actions that you're taking to do that? And a very good point that you made is, so you see some changes on stage, you see a more diverse audience, but where you sometimes, most oftentimes don't see it is, you see a more diverse performers on stage. But where you don't often see it is in the audience, and therefore in the donors, and therefore on the board, and therefore in the staff. So what are the actions that you're taking, you know, that our industry is now going to take in order to change that? You know, and providing equitable experiences and equitable opportunities is I mean, it is the only answer. And so how do you do that? You seek out those, you cast a wider net. You recruit more broadly for positions that, you know, are open on your staff. You don't you don't buy into nepotism, which, sometimes is, not sometimes, it is a little bit of the curse in this industry. You recruit from, a broad pool of candidates. Yes, merit is important and someone who can do the job, but, you don't stay in just a little circle of, industry folks who just pass from position to position. And with that, you have to then broaden your audience so that the audience sees a representation of themselves on stage. And to find that that broadening of that audience, you have to go into the communities. They're literally not going to come to you. Why? Because you haven't extended an olive branch generally to begin with. The Black community, most oftentimes only receives an olive branch when a company is doing a poor gambess. That's it. And then after poor gambess leaves, what are you doing in the community to maintain the relationship? And so to answer your question about what Fort Worth Opera is doing, that's what we're doing, is we're going into our communities in Fort Worth and in Tarrant County and in North Texas to bring what we have to offer to the community. We're not expecting people to come to us anymore. We are taking our physical selves and our physical product and taking, the art to the street. We are taking it into the communities and building trust with communities, with residents in the communities, with community members, with civic leaders in those communities, leaders of faith in those communities, so that we are building pillars in the communities that we then represent on stage, and that we then serve, that we serve through providing programming, that we serve through providing community engagement opportunities. And so that then when we are able to be in a venue, fill in the blank, because it could be any venue, those audience members who are coming to see us now see themselves in the audience. They see themselves in the audience. And then that reflection is exactly what we're putting on stage. And it is not being afraid. I think oftentimes some companies are afraid to cast with their morality, to seek out an Asian singer for Butterfly. Bottom line, to seek out an African American, a Black singer, soprano for Aida. And if you're really doing your history, you would know that Amneris also should be a woman of color. To seek out the best singers, not only for the job, but for the representation of the character in which it calls for that, right?
Right.
And also to not be afraid to show the wide range of diversity, because when we limit ourselves to a whitewash, if you will, we are limiting the creative minds of our audience. We are saying, oh, you can only imagine that, that Mimi in Bohème, you can only imagine that she's a white soprano, European soprano. You cannot imagine her any other way. You cannot imagine Rodolfo any other way. And so we have to stop limiting our audience and boxing them in to our own industry strongholds that we just won't pry open. And so Fort Worth Opera, Maestro Illig has done a wonderful job. Joe Illig has done a wonderful job at programming Spanish-speaking, Spanish-language operas that really draws in the Hispanic community. And we have to continue to build on that relationship so that they continue to see themselves on stage and not just in Spanish-language operas.
Right.
The same thing with the Black community in Porgy and Bess, So, that is what we're doing. And we, my goal and my vision for Fort Worth is to broaden the horizons of our audience by providing programming that is, yes, our traditional pieces that we love, but also pieces and stories of voices who have not had the platform to tell their stories or to share their music and to share their creation.
Yeah, I mean, that's you touched on something that's been a long time frustration in the world of theater is, you've when you talk about diversity and inclusion with playwrights and the people they see on stage, you've had some theater companies going, well, our audience is mostly white. Well, why is your audience mostly white? Because maybe you're not reaching out and doing work that broader audiences and different audiences want to see. As you get to know the local art scene, I think you'll find that for theater, Dallas Theater Center and Fort Worth Stage West are two theaters that really come to mind that have been doing really, really fantastic job with sort of changing the model and being diverse and reaching out to new audiences. So on that note, you mentioned that you do want to partner and collaborate with other arts organizations. Do you mean locally, nationally, or both?
Both. I would love to have a partnering relationship with local artists, not only singers, but also instrumentalists, and not only classically trained or classically based. I would love to have a relationship with, jazz singers, cabaret singers, big band, country western, like taking advantage of the whole thing, so that we find a medium of performing and creating art in both of our sectors. The wonderful thing about singers, especially young singers these days, is they can sing almost about anything. And so to be able to cross over in that fashion opens up opportunities, performance and employment opportunities for everyone. I wish that I had, taken jazz something another when I was in school and, was able to study the music of written jazz and instrumentals, but to be able to offer that. And also not just performing artists, but visual artists and artists who do spoken word and, dialogue and all of those things. And so locally, to have this pot of artists who we are able to collaborate and call on them and program with them in things that are not just on main stage allows us to continue working toward and really honing in on these pillars, which is going into the community. Because you think of all of the opportunities in which small theaters exist in areas of Fort Worth or an area, Arlington Music Hall or in Grapevine or somewhere where a community goes to that theater, community, sees, whomever, and also folks come from outside of the area. But to be able to program something in those types of venues with local artists who then leave out of there and go to the local restaurant or the local bar, and folks see them in their space, it makes it more real and more, not tangible, but really down to earth, I suppose. It puts me in the mindset of thinking about Europe and the Fest model, where they have house singers. And that house singer, in Munich or, Dresden or what have you, is the house soprano, and they sing in most all of the productions. And everyone who lives in the area or comes to the opera knows that individual as the house singer. And they have their own personal relationship with them, whether they've ever met them in person or not, but it is someone who they see and they're familiar with. That's it. It's being able to have a familial relationship with artists in your life. And so that's on the local level, and definitely on the national level. Some really exciting news will be coming out about some collaborations between Fort Worth Opera and some other major shakers and movers in the industry, locally as well as nationally. And I really look forward to leveraging the relationships that I have personally with some of our companies in the industry outside of Texas, and being able to partner with them and do co-productions and really leverage them as resources, not only in this position as general director, but also as a company doing works and producing together.
Yeah. Fort Worth Opera, in a lot of ways, has really been progressive and forward-thinking throughout its history. I mean, it was founded by 3 women musicians. You're the first woman general director and the first Black general director. But it was founded by these 3 women for at least 20 years now. There's been a history of new work being produced by the company, but in the last 20 years, we've seen a boom in new work for this company and also in general around the country. But Fourth Opera has been on the forefront with Frontiers and so many new shows they've done. And I look at, go back to diversity, the lack of Black composers that are being produced. The Met is finally going to do its first opera by a Black composer and to open its 2021-22 season. How do it's certainly a really big event that you are here now at this moment, and I'm guessing maybe one of the few women or Black general directors in the country. How do you feel about upholding Fourth Opera's legacy and also moving it into the future?
Yes, absolutely. The company is historic. 75, going into its 75th year of being around, being founded by these 3 women visionaries before their time. 75 years ago, women were not, founding performing arts organizations. And also the legacy of Fort Worth Opera, exactly like you mentioned. Folks have for a long time looked to Fort Worth Opera as the innovator, if you will, in new works, in works that don't oftentimes receive the stage, if you will, of performance. And so that is something that is unique to us and something that is really intrinsically buried in our DNA, which is fantastic. And I want to bring that out even more. I want to light a fire underneath that. New works are incredibly important. We love our old masters, but new works are the works of individuals who are telling stories that are relevant today. And I say today in like our generational time, but that are telling stories that are relevant, that are telling stories that are representative, and that are telling stories that new audiences want to hear. And they are important because they are what helps us to really push out into our audience, but push out into our industry to open it up, because we can't just go down this path of staging the big 5, whatever the 5 is for your organization. We have to broaden what that looks like and what that feels like. And also, there are artists these days, in this day and age, and in my generation, who are beautiful artists, who are wonderful composers, librettists, who are singers, songwriters, who really thrive in this world of new music. And you brought up the Met doing Terence Blanchford's piece, Shut Up in My Bones, and that is a mix of jazz and modern and classical, and it takes a very skilled singer to be able to read that score, interpret the score, and perform it. And that is a niche in which opera companies sometimes are afraid to go down that path, because it does put you in a position of having a small group of individuals maybe to choose from in order to do that work. But what's really unique about that is you might think that the diameter of the pool of individuals who can perform that work is small, but it's really not. The type of training that this generation of singers is receiving is, I mean, well beyond what I received, in school. And so it allows them to be versatile. But so, and, for Fort Worth Opera to continue down that path of being a hub and an incubator, if you will, of new works allows us to put a stake in the ground and stake our claim. And, for the industry to look and see, oh, what's Fort Worth doing? I want Fort Worth to continue to be the place where world premieres happen. I want Fort Worth Opera to be the organization, the company in which we workshop these pieces that are important, that are, literally hot off of the press, and we're working with the librettist and the composer, and we are in a space where you do what in theater, as you know, what do you have, a 36-hour or 46-hour reading, where you just read through a score for a script, and you make changes, and it's like right on the spot. And that type of creativity is, in my opinion, the future of opera. And that's where we have to go. We can't fight it. The more you fight it, the more resistance you get, and it just is an uphill battle. So I'm like, let's get on the train and let's ride it all the way through, and let's be at the front of the train, leading the industry and blazing the path and doing it.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Fort Worth Opera will look to expand or continue its Noches de opera series, which is work devoted to Latin American Latinx composers and artists. Can you tell us anything about two operas? One would be the Zorro opera that was going to be done this year, and the other is the Frida Kahlo Diego Rivera premiere.
Yes, so we are very much looking forward to a Zorro production, and it is still on our horizon in terms of being able to have that premiere. We're toying around with some really exciting ideas on how to bring that to life and how to bring that to our audience, and I'm really excited about that possibility. And the Frida and Diego, another piece that continues to be at the forefront of the ball that is rolling, and without, I can't speak on anything just quite yet, but I hope the smile on my face gives some indication to the excitement behind those two pieces, and expanding, the Noches de Opera initiative, and that commitment and that programming is so important to the community, but it's so important to Fort Worth Opera, and it is something that is really near and dear to a lot of our staff, but also, our school children, our education program, in having the night at the opera and being able to engage families around that. So there's just so many wonderful things about that initiative that I love, and I am looking forward to expanding that and adding some other equally as amazing initiatives alongside with it.
Yeah, we'll wrap this up soon, but after this question. But you talked about this earlier, but yeah, one of the exciting things about as we look forward to the possibilities of opera being offered in some kind of online fashion is accessibility. So I look at the public theater, for instance, what they've been doing online since the pandemic shutdown started. The new work they did, The Line, which is about medical healthcare workers in New York during the start of the pandemic there, has like 80,000 views on YouTube, and that's something that they couldn't have fit that many people into their space over their long run. And opera and also other art forms have had an accessibility issue in terms of ticket prices. Now, I realize there's no easy way, especially when we're facing economic hardships, to come down on prices like that. But what do you think this moment says about reaching out to to audiences for, and just in sheer terms of affordability?
Absolutely. When I was in New York at New York Theater Workshop, we had an initiative for accessible ticket pricing. And I believe it was $10 to $25, and it was a set number of tickets at that price. And once they were gone, they were gone. But it was a commitment that the organization took in terms of marketing to take that bite out of the revenue that was coming in. Great initiative. And opera and the classical arts have always had an accessibility issue. The Met has, figured out its own way with student rush tickets and, standing room and family circle. But as we work to continue to engage our community, we have to do a little bit better than that, because $25 to me or you or whomever may be like, okay, it's $25. And we may not blink or think twice about it. But $25 to someone else could be a week's worth of groceries. It could be childcare. It could be anything, fill in the blank. And they can't afford to let go of that for something that is culturally stimulating for them. So what I would love to see is our local organizations, community organizations, civic organizations, our local funders, institutional funders, family foundations, private foundations, our localized corporations, to work with and partner with organizations like Fort Worth Opera to start an initiative that allows us to offer accessible ticket pricing. And that accessible ticket pricing can be a range of $1 to $25. And it's like on a sliding scale, or a corporation or an organization or a funder supports that initiative fully for 1 or 2 or 3 years, so that Fort Worth Opera can offer 1,000 tickets or 500 tickets or however many tickets it is per run of a show, and offer them for free. And that's the type of community building and relationship building that we have to do in order to keep the arts vibrant, to keep arts and culture relevant in Fort Worth, to keep that engagement with the community, to keep that line taut, and to keep it real. We need that type of support from those institutions who, live in Texas, those big corporations who live in Texas, and those institutional funders to partner with us arts organizations so that we can continue to do the boots on the ground work by engaging our young people, by engaging our senior citizens, by engaging our community who want and deserve to have accessible art in their life, period. We need those types of relationships.
Yeah, and I also think it's exciting looking at not just online streaming, but TV streaming. Look at what Broadway HD has done, and Marquee TV, and Disney with Hamilton, which of course is just a phenomenon that I don't know if anyone else will be able to touch for a while, but possibly.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like there's a lot of exciting possibilities in the arts world.
There's a lot of them. And I think, something else that we have to make the space for is investing in the type of equipment and training and personnel to record our own, HD recordings. The Met has a wonderful thing going with their HD series. And so we have to be able to invest in that type of technology, to be able to invest in the personnel who runs that type of technology, et cetera, so that we can grow our own archives, so that we can be able to continue to remove eliminate that barrier to access in this virtual space, because it, you know, like I said earlier, it's not going anywhere, and it shouldn't. We have learned a valuable lesson, and so now we have to take the steps and the actions necessary in order for us to continue to be in that space in a relevant way, high quality, where, you know, as easy as you can, you know, skim through Disney Plus or Netflix and find a title that you want to watch, you know, you should be able to do the same thing online. And it's a great goal to aspire to. And there's so many wonderful opportunities, and also just genius people who create these types of platforms and applications for that. And, you know, we need that type of buzz and foundation and really support to be able to offer that to the community. And it goes hand in hand with offering accessibility to the theater. It goes hand in hand. If you can offer accessibility into the theater, you should be able to offer accessibility for those who can't leave their house. They might be immobile. How are we still connecting with those communities as well?
Yeah, great. Okay, well, that's it. Go ahead and give me a plug for Frontiers and anything else coming up that you want to plug.
Absolutely. Well, Fort Worth Opera continues to drive forward in our virtual space. The Green Room is a wonderful, beautiful place. If you have not been to the Green Room to visit, please do. We have a wonderful video up now called His Light Still Shines, which is a choral piece, about 15 minutes, Moses Hogan piece that is directed and produced by our wonderful our wonderful choral master, Alfrelyn Roberts. We also have the libretto workshop coming up, part of our Frontiers series, October 7th and 8th. Please join us for some wonderful new works that are being highlighted and that are being produced and really workshopped in front of your very eyes, and hopefully something that you'll see on our stages in the next coming seasons.
Great. Well, it's great to talk to you, Afton. Thank you so much for your time. And I look forward to the day when we can meet in person and maybe do an elbow bump, if not a handshake.
Absolutely, Mark. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
You too. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.